And we are live here with SCI TV. I'm Joshua Gordon, the founder of the Sports Conflict Institute, and I'm joined by Dr. Ken Pendleton and Dr. Shannon Leinert. Welcome.
Hi, Josh.
Hi, Josh.
So Shannon, you're our special guest for today. You're a new face for some of our audience. Maybe you could introduce some of your background both as a runner and also professionally elsewhere as well.
All right, yeah. So I've been running since I was 8 years old, and it's always been a huge piece of my life. And I'd say I've been running competitively and going to USA's and AAU type meets, and then running in high school and then college, and now professionally for the Oregon Track Club Elite, which is based in Eugene, Oregon. And so that's I've learned a lot through sport in that way. And then I've also have my academic career that I'm super passionate about, and so I received my PhD in special education, and I work mostly with children with autism or behavioral challenges, and so I kind of look at myself as like a behaviorist or somebody who specializes in behavior change, specifically for children with disabilities. So that's my background.
So you have a lot of success and achievement in your past and likely in your future as well. But our topic for the week that we've been taking on as a group is athlete transitions. And I know that you've been through a few of these, going from high school to college and actually college to college, and transitions to your professional runner career, and then also thinking about life after running. So one of the things we're really hoping to focus in on a bit is some of those transitions and then some of the other things that you've found along the way at those different stops as well.
All right.
So maybe talk about one of those transitions and give us a little bit of background. You know, what were some of the things that were particularly easy, and what were some of the things that were really hard in dealing with those types of transitions?
Well, I guess we can start maybe when I was a little younger. I was working or running for a local club in St. Louis, Missouri, where I'm from, and I transitioned into high school and transitioned from my dad as my coach to a high school coach. And I think some of the benefits is that you don't have your family like kind of telling you what to do, and you have some outside support, and you start kind of to expand your resources and expand your network. And so I think I learned some basic skills at that time, and then I transitioned from high school into college, and with that experience it was really intense because I was getting calls all the time from universities across the country. I was asked to, take 5 official visits, and I had to narrow down from like 30 schools to 5, and then narrow 5 down to 1. I remember at times I'd be like crying, like laying on my floor, like telling my mom that I don't know what to do. And I think that it's hard to make those decisions at 18 years old, like where almost in a way it's like this is going to change my life. And so then I transitioned from a high schooler into college and went through that as well.
Well, let's pick it up there, because right away what sort of strikes me is here's this moment you should be the proudest of. You're being rewarded for your accomplishments, and you should feel really proud. But yet what you felt was weightiness, right? About having to make this choice, choosing the 5 for the official visit, the 1 school that you're going to decide to attend, which means dropping those other 4, not to mention the other 30. But the hard part should have been done then. You've now made the hard choice. You've settled into this school. Did it work out that way?
Well, I think at the time I thought no school is perfect, and I remember having so many pros. I remember making pros and cons lists, and I remember there were pros and cons at every university I was choosing. And so I think going into my university setting, I knew that it wasn't going to be perfect. But I also thought that I had people supporting me, that I had my back, who believed in me. I mean, to me, the NCAA core values are all about sportsmanship, and they're about creating an environment for student athletes to foster and thrive. And so as soon as I got to the University of Florida, which is actually where I decided to go, I don't really think I had all of that in place like I thought I would. And so in that way, there were a lot of challenges related to maybe the structure of the university. But I don't want to say that it was only challenges. I mean, there were amazing things that I had learned as well. And as you're 18, 19, 20, and you're in these like vulnerable stages of development, you're going to learn a lot of things along the way. And so I was able to have a lot of positive experiences as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about both. How about laying out some of the positive ones, and then some of the ones that were some of the bigger challenges that you faced.
Mm-hmm. Some of the positives was my initial coach. His name was Jeff Pig, and I went to his office every day, and he was kind of like my father away from home. And I've always, like, my father coached me as a kid, and so that was super important to have, someone who would listen to me and just kind of hear what I had to say, hear my thoughts, give me autonomy. And so I think for those reasons, like having like that coaching support for my first 2 years while at the University of Florida was amazing. And I think that was a huge piece, a huge positive piece. Then with regards to negative, I'd say that I had some injuries, and I didn't have the support that I thought I would have from those after receiving those injuries. I think I first suffered from a hamstring tear, and then a stress fracture, and then I twisted my ankle and had a stress fracture after that. And so I think overall, through my college career and high school, I've had 8 stress fractures. So it's quite a lot.
So when you're thinking back about that transition from high school to those values that you were talking about the NCAA holding, you must have had an image in your mind about what that experience is going to be like. That probably had a certain path, what freshman year would look like, and sophomore, and where you would ultimately end up senior year. What did that path really become? And you mentioned injuries, and you mentioned some of those things, but obviously those things create a meandering path. And can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what structures maybe surprised you that weren't in place, or were in place in a different way?
The path, I think, is natural. I think a lot of athletes are going to go through ups and downs through their life, or just people are always going to have their trials and then their successes as well. And so I don't look at it as like a bad thing, like to have my ups and downs. I definitely look at it as a natural progression through a system. But I think what surprised me was possibly like the lack of support I got after I would have those stress fractures or those injuries. I felt like, when you go to a university, you hope that they're there to help foster you and to keep you around and to support you. And I even remember sitting at the kitchen table with my family and asking coaches this who were coming into my home. I understand there's horror stories related to people getting an injury and then getting kicked out of the school, or getting let go or losing their scholarship. And I wanted to be at a place that had some integrity and didn't do that. I felt like I wanted to be at a place that when you got injured, they were still going to like fight with you and support you, because with sports, you're very passionate about it, and so you don't want to give up. And so I think that you hope that you have coaches that don't want to give up on you as well. And I don't think I had that at Florida.
Okay. So basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, what you would have liked is, okay, injuries occur, but did you feel somewhat discarded at that point? It's like basically they were, all of a sudden you're sort of invisible within the program. Is that a fair characterization? Or
yeah, and it's a pressure. I think that it's an unintended pressure, perhaps, but it's a pressure nonetheless. And I felt like maybe the administration and the coaches, they put a pressure on these athletes to perform to a certain level, and if you're injured, you're not at the starting line, and so you're not going to be able to perform. And so you almost have this, like, you kind of feel like a failure in some ways, because the idea is that you're here in this environment to thrive and perform on the track, at least with my avenue. And so I was unable to do that with my injuries.
Now, did that change after you then moved on and found another program? Did you find a different culture, or do you find that it kind of repeated itself? What was your experience afterward?
I think that it changed for me, but not always for my teammates. It changed for me because I actually had success afterwards. Let's hypothetically say that I went to my next university and got injured there. I don't know if I would have had the same reaction as I did at the first university, because I was successful at my second university. But but I would say that I saw teammates around me at my second university, which was the University of Missouri, suffer from similar situations as I had had. And so I think that the grass is not greener on the other side in some ways, but I don't know. So for me, it was just, I think every university has their their positives and their negatives, and I think that that's something that's actually broken across universities, and yeah, through the NCAA not enforcing the rules.
Yeah, I've spent a fair amount of time looking at football and managerial culture and coaching, and I would have to say one of the common threads among coaches who differ on many issues is the idea that they really treat people who are injured, as though, with a certain amount of disdain or invisibility, unless it's like a life-threatening kind of injury, or a career, or unequivocally career-ending injury, because they think that by doing that they're motivating you, right? That that they don't want to give you any reward for being idle if they think that you can possibly play through pain, or you could be doing more to rehabilitate yourself. Do you feel like that's the culture in track and field as well, or was that your experience, or do you think that might explain the motivations for the way the coaches reacted when you got injured, or when some of the people you were teammates with at Missouri got injured?
I think that it is really similar. I think that coaches are under the same types of environment. I think the culture is really similar to football as to track, as you're describing. But I don't think that that's the right way of motivating. I think that you have to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of motivation, and really look at what is motivation, and motivation 101 in a way. And so looking at having the basic.
Sorry, the show goes on even when people are trying to reach us. No worries here.
Yeah, of course. But.
Go ahead.
I'll just describe that. I feel like I think coaches need to have the training to set up an environment that's going to actually motivate their athletes based on theory and based on practice. And so I think one way to do that is by making sure that their basic level of needs are met, and that would be food and water, and then making sure that their secondary needs are met, self-worth, and making sure they feel like they belong, making sure that they feel loved, and not in a romantic way, but just a way of belonging, your human nature. You want to make sure that you make your athletes feel like they're needed. And then I think that that all goes up into the final need is just being able to be creative and being able to problem solve and just being able to thrive as an athlete. And if they aren't setting up that basic motivation, then I don't think that it's going to be a successful model.
And if you're looking at the pillars of the NCAA, right, in a lot of ways they're meant to be this very holistic experience. You're supposed to have the academic and the community and the social along with the athletic. And yet I think you highlighted an important point, which is that coaches maybe aren't motivated or incentivized to focus so equally on all of those areas, that they really are about performance. And some are able to carve out more space for some of the other areas that you highlight, but maybe not all. And so then if you're no longer healthy and active, their ability to support you in the classroom maybe is diminished. And do you think you just ran into a couple of personalities, or do you think that this is an experience that repeats itself for many, many people who go through injuries in athletics?
Well, two things. I definitely think I ran into a personality. And second, I think it is common across universities. So I think it's both. I think that my story is not in isolation. I think there's ample amount of stories similar to mine. I think that it's important for student athletes to come out and speak, because I believe there is some type of power dynamic between the coaches and the athletes that's unavoidable just by the nature of the relationship. And I think that might be one reason why athletes are actually trying to unionize, because that shows that there is a problem. And I don't think unionization is the solution, but I think that it's just kind of the first step to show that there is a problem. There are student athletes being treated unfairly in some way, and that change and reform is going to need to occur. But yeah, that would be my opinion, that it's kind of all over.
Yeah, I would want to suggest that there's sort of two things going on here. The first is the ultimately, unfortunately perhaps, but ultimately coaches are judged by the performance on the field and whatever their area of expertise is, whether it's football or track and field or swimming or what have you. And therefore they tend to narrow their range of focus. But the second issue I think is more subtle, which is, this is especially true of football, but I believe it's true of all the sports, that we really believe that the most important non-cognitive value that sports is supposed to teach is toughness, right? That perseverance, and so it means you learn to, what is one of the fundamental axioms, that you learn to play through pain, right? And so I think this is somewhat of an out of date view. Obviously, playing through pain is still a very important non-cognitive development, but we have so much more subtle understanding of what motivates people now, and how people are, how complex people are in terms of how they're put together, and than I think we did 50 years ago. And I feel like coaching hasn't really often caught up to that, to think about, because what I'm hearing when I'm listening to you, what I'm hearing really is a disconnect. Like the coaches really lost the ability to empathize with what would have actually done the best job, not only of rehabilitating you, having you perform your best actually as a runner, right? Because they had this, if you're not performing, we're going to make you feel like you're irrelevant to our to our program. Right, and that actually didn't motivate you; it demotivated you. It sounds like.
I think that I was actually given the opportunity to practice mental toughness, to practice perseverance. I was, through that experience, given that opportunity to see how resilient I could be and see how well I could bounce back from my injuries and bounce back from being essentially like kicked off my first university's team. And so I think in that way it did do that, but I agree, like I don't think the coaches are really setting you up to do that within them. Like it almost was like, all right, so it's based on performance, she's not performing, so go ahead and move her out, rather than saying, okay, why can't we figure out why she's not performing in this environment and figure out a way to have her perform within our environment, rather than just letting her leave and go to a new environment, if that makes sense.
It does.
So what do you think, if we were doing reform mode here and how to make things better, should the NCAA be required when they make a commitment to an athlete coming out of high school to have that commitment be for the duration of their career, or do you think that that's unnecessary?
I think that is 100% necessary, and I think that is probably, if I was going to put myself on if I was going to advocate for something, that would definitely be what it is. And that I think that universities should promise at student athletes 4-year scholarships, but also giving them some leeway within that. Like, let's say someone gets in trouble with the law, or they're using street drugs, or they're failing drug tests. I think that there should be caveats to that rule, and that universities should be able to discard somebody's scholarship if necessary. But at the same time, I think that if somebody, such as myself, volunteering endlessly, is a leader through example, is getting good grades in school, is not messing up outside my social life, I think that I should get that 4-year commitment. And I think that the school needs to figure out a way to help me be successful. I don't think it's my fault. I think it is the coach's fault, and I think that they need to figure out a way to make their system a way for me to thrive. And I was unable to do that at the University of Florida, but I was able to do that at the University of Missouri. So it just goes to show that I wasn't broken. It wasn't me. As long as I'm healthy and having an environment where I have coaches believing in me and know that I'm passionate and want to see me successful, then I just think it shows that there's broken college systems out there, and they need to have some reform.
Yeah, as a historical matter, until 1973, scholarships were 4-year scholarships, right? To the extent that they gave them, and I should put in a big caveat there that women didn't get scholarships because Title IX was just passing. But to the extent scholarships were given out, they were 4-year scholarships, and the only way they could be revoked would be if you had poor academic progress or you failed certain moral turpitude clauses, right? And if you think about it with what happened at the University of Florida, if they wouldn't have changed that rule, they're going to have a different calculation of how to relate to you while you're there, because since you're going to be there for 4 years, all of a sudden it makes sense to actually really, to think a lot harder about can we rehabilitate this person, because we can't churn the scholarship, right? So by having the 1-year scholarships, the really crucial impact of it is it allows coaches to essentially introduce athletic performance as a condition of continuing to get your academic scholarship, right? And it sends the wrong message too, because it suggests that the primary purpose of your university experience is athletic, because if you don't meet muster that way, they can take away your scholarship, right? Where if you have the 4-year scholarship, the meta message is the opposite. You're primarily a student, secondarily an athlete. But it also, like I said, it means the coaches would feel a need to invest a lot more in developing your performance and being patient with your rehabilitation.
Right.
It certainly changes the dynamic of the whole recruiting process, where, if you're going to vet someone for a 4-year relationship, that's very different than for a 1-year at your disposal relationship, right? What about, so that's one set of transitions. Now there's other phases you've been through. You're now a professional athlete. You must be contemplating your career at some point beyond athletics, and I know you do things concurrent to athletics as well. Have those transitions gotten any easier, or is it just a new set of challenges that come out for you?
Actually, I think they do get easier. I think you learn a lot from your first transition, and then you learn more from your second, and then you learn more from your third. As long as you're listening and you're mindful and aware of what you're learning during those first and second transitions, you're able to use those skills for sure in your third and fourth transitions. And so I'd say after I left Florida and went to Mizzou, I did have another transition in related to what I was going to do after college. And so I had a really amazing mentor, and he suggested that I continue my education. But at that moment, I had already had my undergraduate degree, and I had already had my master's. And so I thought to myself, does that mean PhD? And I never saw myself as a really strong reader and writer. And so I didn't think of myself as someone who's going to get a PhD. I mean, I had already kind of received my educational degrees in special education. And so I decided to apply, and I decided to try to learn more about kids with special needs, and I thought that might be something that was super important to me. And but actually, to be honest, I didn't really know what a PhD meant. I went into it not knowing what this world of academia really was, and this whole culture of academics. And so I just did it mostly, was athletically motivated, and I went to the professor and I interviewed, and she was a huge supporter of my running and a huge supporter of my previous experiences in the classroom, and so she took me on as her candidate, or her PhD student. So I received my PhD in autism, but simultaneously I was training for the Olympics, and I made the Olympic trials, and I was fairly successful as a post-collegiate, and all of that was really due to my support that I got from the classroom.
Well, it turns out to be a very nice story then at the end, because you sort of ended up getting out of your athletic experience that what the NCAA actually wants you to accomplish, which is growth as a human being, professional development, educational development, etc.
That's true. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, in a lot of ways you represent the very values that they espouse to, but not because they put a system in place to get you there, but because you navigated kind of a rocky road at times to get there. And you think if you're giving advice to other athletes that are going to head into this, do they just have to brace themselves for potentially tough transitions, or are there things that, if you could go back again, that you could have done that were in your control to set yourself up to have a smoother ride in spots where it was a little rocky?
With the way the system is right now, I would say brace yourself for some rocky situations. I don't think that it's going to be seamless, and for the majority of the student athletes. And I don't think that's for everybody, and I know there's tons of amazing experiences out there, but at the same time, there's, like I said, probably more negative experiences than positive. So I would say, with the way the system is now, just embracing that ups and downs and just knowing that there's definitely going to be a lot. It's not going to be perfect, and you're going to feel like maybe lied to. You're going to feel like you're not wanted at times, and so I think that's
right on cue. You said you're going to feel like you're unwanted, and Ken walked out on us here.
Sorry, our phone.
Ken's working on his prop comedy for us at the end of the show here.
Sorry. We've had the dreaded technical glitches have come on all fronts today.
So Shannon, any final thoughts as we wrap up here? I think your story has been certainly a lot of fun to hear, and certainly really impressive to see that at any one of those bumps in the road, it would have been very understandable for you to step out at that point, right? At the point where you're not on the team at Florida, it would have been a reasonable reaction to say, okay, I'm done, and I'm going to focus on something else. And I'm sure there are a couple other moments like that. And so, resiliency you mentioned certainly seems to be a key word that you've embraced and really represent. Any final thoughts for folks, or even just ways people can connect with you to continue to follow your story, because it's certainly not done yet?
Okay, yes, I'd love to take this opportunity. I do believe in resiliency. I've actually studied a lot about resiliency, the theories behind it, and how it works in practice as well. And I think my definition of resiliency is actually the ability to use your resources. And I know that's not everybody's definition, but I also think that it's a huge piece of how you're going to be successful and how you're going to persevere and get through a hard time, is by not sitting back and thinking like I can figure it out myself, but really being able to say, okay, there's something going on, I've got to figure it out, and I'm going to go call as many people as I know. I'm going to network as best as I can. I'm going to use my resources and try to figure out what they would do, and not so much like listen to everyone's advice in a way that you're going to do it, but take it all in and kind of then make the best decision for yourself. So I'd say resiliency is a huge piece of gathering your resources and using your resources. So I just say, for anyone who has to go through trials such as this or anything in your life, that don't just kind of sit back in your room and like try to think that you can figure it out all yourself, but get out there and try to ask questions and use your resources.
Great advice. And for all the ways they can follow you, whether it's Twitter or your website, what are those, just so people don't lose track of you and can see the months ahead and years ahead?
All right, yeah, I'd really appreciate a follow or checking out my website.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it. We'd love to have you back.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It was awesome.